It was a cold, gray morning when Dr. Emily Carter first noticed the small dog sitting outside the hospital doors. The rain had been falling steadily for hours, drenching the streets and turning the pavement into a slick, reflective mirror. The world seemed muted, as if the weather itself had cast a somber tone over the day. The hospital, a sprawling structure of glass and steel, stood as a beacon of hope for many. But for Emily, it was a place of relentless routine and responsibility. She was a cardiologist, a woman who thrived on precision and structure, her life a carefully orchestrated symphony of surgeries, consultations, and paperwork. Distractions were a luxury she couldn't afford. Yet there he was, a scruffy terrier mix, his fur matted and his eyes filled with a quiet determination. He wasn't begging for food or shelter. He wasn't barking or causing a scene. He was simply waiting, his gaze fixed on the hospital entrance as if expecting someone to walk through those doors at any moment. Emily paused, her heels clicking against the wet pavement, and for a brief moment, she allowed herself to study him. There was something about his presence, something that tugged at her, despite her best efforts to ignore it. The dog's coat was a patchwork of brown and white, streaked with mud from the rain. His ears were slightly droopy, and one of them had a small tear, as if he'd been in a scuffle at some point. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, deep, soulful, and filled with a sadness that seemed almost human. Emily shook her head, chiding herself for being sentimental. She had a surgery in less than an hour, and she couldn't afford to be distracted. Yet, as she walked away, she couldn't shake the image of those eyes from her mind. The routine begins. The next day, the dog was still there. And the day after that, Emily began to notice him every morning, sitting in the same spot, his gaze unwavering. She asked around, but no one seemed to know where he had come from. The nurses called him the Little Guardian, a name that stuck as the days turned into weeks. There was something about his quiet vigilance that resonated with the staff and patients alike. He became a fixture, a silent sentinel who seemed to embody the very essence of loyalty and hope. One evening, as Emily left the hospital after a particularly grueling shift, she found herself stopping beside the dog. She crouched down, her coat pooling around her in the rain. "What are you waiting for, little guy?" she murmured, her voice softer than she intended. The dog tilted his head, his ears twitching, but he didn't move. His eyes, however, seemed to hold a story, one of loss, loyalty, and an unshakable hope. Emily felt a pang of something she couldn't quite name. It wasn't pity exactly. It was more like recognition, as if she had stumbled upon a kindred spirit in the most unexpected of places. Emily couldn't explain why, but she began to bring food for the dog. A sandwich from the cafeteria, a bag of treats from the store. She even left a small blanket for him, though he rarely used it. He seemed content to sit in the rain, his focus never wavering from the hospital doors. It was as if he had a mission, a purpose that transcended his own comfort. Emily found herself drawn to him, her curiosity growing with each passing day. It wasn't until a chance conversation with an elderly patient that Emily began to piece together the mystery. The patient, a kind woman named Mrs. Henderson, had been watching the dog from her window. "That little fellow," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "He belonged to Mr. Thompson. Sweet man. Always came to visit his wife. She passed away last month, but that dog, he hasn't left since." Emily's heart sank. Mr. Thompson, a retired teacher, had been a regular at the hospital for years, visiting his wife, who had been battling a long illness. Emily remembered him now, a gentle man with a warm smile and a deep love for his wife. She had seen them together in the waiting room, his hand always resting on hers, his voice steady and reassuring. They had been a team, facing the challenges of her illness together with a quiet strength that had left an impression on everyone who crossed their path. But after his wife's passing, Mr. Thompson had stopped coming. And now his dog was here, waiting for someone who would never return. Emily felt a lump rise in her throat. She had always prided herself on her ability to remain detached, to focus on the science of healing rather than the emotions that came with it. But this was different. This was a story of love, so profound that it transcended even death. It was a reminder that the bonds we form, whether with humans or animals, are not easily broken. They linger, even in the face of loss, shaping our lives in ways we can't always understand. A new beginning. That night, Emily made a decision. She couldn't leave the dog out in the cold any longer. She approached him cautiously, a leash in hand. "Come on, little guardian," she said softly. "Let's get you somewhere warm." To her surprise, the dog didn't resist. He stood slowly, his movements stiff from days of sitting in the rain, and followed her to her car. At home, Emily bathed him, gently working the knots out of his fur. She fed him a warm meal and set up a cozy bed by the fireplace. The dog, whom she now called Max, seemed to relax for the first time in weeks. But even as he settled into his new surroundings, his eyes often drifted to the window, as if searching for something or someone. Over time, Max became a part of Emily's life. He accompanied her to the hospital, where he quickly became a favorite among the staff and patients. His presence brought comfort to those who needed it most, his quiet loyalty a reminder of the power of love and connection. He had a way of sensing when someone was in pain, whether physical or emotional, and he would sit beside them, offering his silent support. It was as if he had taken on the role of guardian not just for Emily, but for everyone who crossed his path. One day, as Emily sat with Max in the hospital courtyard, she noticed a familiar figure approaching. It was Mr. Thompson, his face lined with grief but his eyes filled with a quiet strength. He had heard about Max's vigil and had come to see him. Max's reaction was immediate. He bounded toward Mr. Thompson, his tail wagging furiously, his barks echoing through the courtyard. Mr. Thompson knelt down, tears streaming down his face as he wrapped his arms around the dog. "I'm so sorry, boy," he whispered. "I didn't mean to leave you." Emily watched from a distance, her own eyes filling with tears. It was a moment of pure, unspoken love, a reunion that spoke volumes about the bond between humans and animals. It was a reminder that love, in its purest form, is not bound by time or circumstance. It endures, even in the face of loss, and it has the power to heal even the deepest wounds. From that day on, Max split his time between Emily and Mr. Thompson. He became a symbol of hope and healing, a reminder that even in the face of loss, love endures. And for Emily, he was a lesson in the power of compassion, a lesson that would stay with her for the rest of her life. As weeks turned into months, Emily found herself growing closer to Max. His presence in her life was a constant source of comfort, especially during the long, exhausting nights at the hospital. She began to notice subtle changes in herself, a softening of her once rigid demeanor, a newfound patience with her patients, and a deeper appreciation for the small moments of joy that life offered. Max had a way of grounding her, of reminding her that there was more to life than the relentless pace of her career. One evening, as Emily sat on her porch with Max by her side, she found herself reflecting on the journey they had shared. "You've changed me, Max," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't realize how much I needed you until you came into my life." Max looked up at her, his eyes filled with a quiet understanding. It was as if he knew exactly what she was feeling, even if he couldn't put it into words. Emily reached down to stroke his fur, her heart swelling with gratitude. She had always thought of herself as self-sufficient, someone who didn't need anyone or anything to feel complete. But Max had shown her that there was strength in vulnerability, that it was okay to lean on others, even if that other was a scruffy little dog with a heart full of love. But their journey was far from over. One day, as Emily was preparing for a routine surgery, she received a call from Mr. Thompson. His voice was strained, filled with a sense of urgency. "Emily, I need your help," he said. "Max, he's not doing well." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She quickly finished her preparations and rushed to Mr. Thompson's house. When she arrived, she found Max lying on the floor, his breathing labored and his eyes dull. It was clear that he was in pain. Without hesitation, Emily scooped Max into her arms and rushed him to the animal hospital. The drive felt like an eternity, each passing second filled with a sense of dread. Emily couldn't bear the thought of losing Max, not after everything they had been through. At the animal hospital, the veterinarians worked tirelessly to stabilize Max. Emily waited anxiously, her mind racing with thoughts of what could have gone wrong. Finally, after what felt like hours, the veterinarian emerged with a somber expression. "Max has a heart condition. the veterinarian explained. "It's something that's been developing over time, and it's reached a critical stage. We've done what we can for now, but he's going to need ongoing care." Emily felt a lump rise in her throat. She had spent her career saving lives, but now, faced with the possibility of losing Max, she felt utterly helpless. She knew that she would do whatever it took to give him the best possible care, but the road ahead would be challenging. Over the next few months, Emily and Mr. Thompson worked together to care for Max. They adjusted his diet, administered his medications, and made sure he got plenty of rest. It was a labor of love, and despite the challenges, they found solace in the bond they shared with Max. As Max's health improved, Emily began to notice a change in Mr. Thompson as well. The grief that had once consumed him seemed to lessen, replaced by a sense of purpose and fulfillment. He often spoke of how Max had saved him, just as Emily had saved Max. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, Mr. Thompson turned to Emily with a smile. "You know, Emily," he said, "I think Max brought us together for a reason. He's not just a dog. He's a reminder of the power of love and connection." Emily nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "He's changed both of our lives," she said, "and I'll always be grateful for that." As time went on, Emily and Mr. Thompson became inseparable. They spent their days caring for Max, sharing stories of their past, and finding comfort in each other's company. Emily, who had once been so focused on her career, began to open up to the idea of a life beyond the hospital. She found joy in the simple things: a walk in the park with Max, a cup of coffee with Mr. Thompson, and the quiet moments of reflection that came with each passing day. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset, Mr. Thompson turned to Emily with a thoughtful expression. "Emily," he said, "I've been thinking, what if we started a foundation in Max's name? Something that helps animals in need, just like we helped him." Emily's eyes lit up at the idea. "That's a wonderful idea," she said. "Max has brought so much love and healing into our lives. It would be amazing to share that with others." And so they began to plan. They reached out to local shelters, veterinarians, and animal lovers, sharing their vision of a foundation dedicated to helping animals in need. The response was overwhelming. Donations poured in, volunteers offered their time, and soon, the Max Foundation became a reality. The foundation provided medical care, shelter, and support for animals in need, as well as education and resources for their owners. It was a testament to the power of love and compassion, and a reminder that even in the face of loss, there is always hope. As the years passed, Max grew older, but his spirit remained as strong as ever. He continued to bring joy and comfort to everyone he met, his presence a constant reminder of the bond between humans and animals. One day, as Emily and Mr. Thompson sat together in the foundation's office, they received a call from a local school. The students had been inspired by Max's story and wanted to visit the foundation to learn more about how they could help animals in need. Emily and Mr. Thompson welcomed the students with open arms, sharing Max's story and the mission of the foundation. The children listened intently, their eyes filled with wonder and compassion. As they left, one of the students turned to Emily and said, "Thank you for showing us how much love can change the world." Emily smiled, her heart filled with gratitude. "It's not just us," she said. "It's Max. He's the one who showed us the way." As Max's health began to decline, Emily and Mr. Thompson made the difficult decision to let him go. It was a heart-wrenching moment, but they knew it was the kindest thing they could do for him. They held him close, whispering words of love and gratitude as he took his final breath. In the days that followed, Emily and Mr. Thompson found solace in the memories they had shared with Max. They visited the foundation often, finding comfort in the knowledge that his legacy would live on through the work they were doing. One evening, as they sat together in the park where Max had loved to play, Mr. Thompson turned to Emily with a smile. "He's still with us, you know," he said. "In every animal we help, in every life we touch, Max's spirit lives on." Emily nodded, her eyes filled with tears. "He'll always be with us," she said. "And I'll always be grateful for the time we had together." Max's first night at Emily's home. That first night, Max seemed restless. He paced around the living room, his nails clicking against the hardwood floor. Emily sat on the couch, watching him with a mix of curiosity and concern. "What's wrong, buddy?" she asked softly. Max stopped pacing and looked at her, his eyes filled with a quiet longing. It was as if he was searching for something, or someone. Emily patted the spot beside her on the couch. "Come here," she said. Max hesitated for a moment before jumping up and curling into a ball beside her. Emily gently stroked his fur, feeling the tension slowly leave his body. For the first time in weeks, Max seemed to relax. The next morning, Emily decided to take Max to the hospital with her. She wasn't sure how he would react to the bustling environment, but she thought it might do him good to be around people. As they walked through the hospital doors, Max's ears perked up and his tail began to wag. The nurses and patients immediately took notice. "Who's this little guy?" one of the nurses asked, crouching down to pet him. "This is Max," Emily replied, smiling. "He's our new little guardian." Max seemed to thrive in the hospital environment, bringing smiles to everyone he met. Max's first encounter with a patient. One day, as Emily was making her rounds, she noticed Max sitting beside a young patient in the pediatric ward. The boy, who had been quiet and withdrawn, was now smiling as he petted Max's head. Emily watched from the doorway, her heart swelling with gratitude. It was moments like these that reminded her of the power of love and connection. Max had a way of bringing comfort to those who needed it most, his quiet presence a reminder that they were not alone. Max's first walk in the park. On a rare day off, Emily decided to take Max for a walk in the park. The sun was shining, and the air was filled with the scent of blooming flowers. Max seemed to come alive, his tail wagging furiously as he explored the park. Emily watched him with a smile, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. It was moments like these that reminded her of the importance of slowing down and appreciating the simple joys in life. Max's first Christmas. That Christmas, Emily and Mr. Thompson decided to celebrate together. They decorated the house with lights and ornaments, and Max watched with curiosity as they hung the stockings by the fireplace. When it came time to open presents, Max was the first to receive his gift, a new collar with a small bell that jingled as he walked. He seemed to love it, wagging his tail and prancing around the room. Emily and Mr. Thompson laughed, their hearts filled with joy. It was a Christmas they would never forget. Max's first birthday party. On Max's first birthday with Emily and Mr. Thompson, they decided to throw him a small party. They invited a few close friends and even baked a special dog-friendly cake. Max seemed to enjoy the attention, wagging his tail and barking happily as everyone sang "Happy Birthday." It was a day filled with love and laughter, a reminder of the joy Max had brought into their lives. Max's first trip to the beach. One summer, Emily and Mr. Thompson decided to take Max to the beach. It was his first time seeing the ocean, and he seemed both excited and a little nervous. As they walked along the shore, Max ran ahead, his paws sinking into the sand. He barked at the waves, chasing them as they rolled. In the weeks following Max's passing, the silence in Emily's home felt heavy. His bed by the fireplace remained untouched, a shrine to memories of his gentle presence. Mr. Thompson often joined her there, the two of them sipping tea and sharing stories of Max's quirks, how he'd tilt his head at the sound of the doorbell, or nudge their hands when he wanted attention. Grief hung in the air, but so did gratitude. They'd promised each other not to let sorrow overshadow the joy Max had brought them. One rainy afternoon, a call came to the Max Foundation. A scruffy terrier mix, found shivering under a bridge, needed urgent care. Emily hesitated. It felt too soon, but Mr. Thompson gently insisted, "Max would have wanted us to help." When they met the dog, her matted fur and soulful eyes mirrored Max's story. They named her Luna, and as Emily bathed her, she felt a familiar tug on her heart. Luna's first night was spent curled on Max's old blanket, as if she knew it was a sacred space. Luna's rescue marked a shift. The foundation began pairing therapy animals with grieving families, inspired by Max's legacy. A young girl who'd lost her mother to illness found solace in Luna's quiet companionship. Emily watched them together in the hospital courtyard, the girl's laughter mingling with Luna's playful barks. It was a living testament to Max's enduring influence, a bridge between loss and hope. Mr. Thompson, once reserved, became the foundation's storyteller. He visited schools, recounting Max's vigil and the power of loyalty. During one talk, a boy asked, "Do you think Max knew how much he mattered?" Mr. Thompson's voice cracked. "Yes," he said. "Love always leaves a footprint." Later, the boy donated his birthday money to the foundation, sparking a wave of small, heartfelt contributions. Emily's colleagues noticed her softer edge. She now paused to hold a patient's hand or share a story of Max. One night, after saving a teenager's life in surgery, she sat alone in the chapel, tears streaming. "You taught me to feel again," she whispered into the quiet, imagining Max's paw resting on her knee. For the first time, she didn't chastise herself for the tears. On the anniversary of Max's passing, the foundation inaugurated the Little Guardian Award, honoring individuals who exemplified selfless compassion. The first recipient was a nurse who'd adopted 3 hospice cats, offering them love in their final days. As she accepted the award, she nodded to Emily and Mr. Thompson. Max's story reminded us all that every life deserves a guardian. Months later, an envelope arrived for Emily. Inside was a faded photo of Mr. Thompson's late wife, cradling a puppy, Max, young and vibrant. A note in her handwriting read, "Take care of each other." Mr. Thompson traced the words, tears in his eyes. "She always knew," he said. The photo found a home on the foundation's wall, a full-circle moment of love's unbroken chain. Years drifted by. Emily's hair silvered, and Mr. Thompson's steps slowed, but their mission thrived. Luna, now a gray-muzzled elder, became a mascot for new volunteers. At a fundraiser, a donor remarked, "It's amazing what one dog started." Emily smiled. "Max didn't just start it. He taught us how to keep going." When Emily retired, she handed the foundation's reins to a former patient, a woman who'd survived cancer and credited Max's visits for her strength. "Guard his legacy well," Emily urged. The woman clasped her hands. "We'll add new chapters, but his paw prints will always guide us." On a crisp autumn morning, Emily and Mr. Thompson visited Max's memorial plaque in the hospital garden. Leaves swirled around them, golden and fleeting. "He's everywhere," Mr. Thompson murmured. Emily nodded, slipping her hand into his. In the laughter of children playing nearby, the wag of a passing dog's tail, and the quiet acts of kindness that rippled through the world, Max's spirit endured, a little guardian forever etched in the heart of time. One summer, Emily and Mr. Thompson took Luna to a secluded cabin in the mountains, a place Mr. Thompson's wife had loved. As Luna bounded through the pine-scented trails, Emily found herself opening up about her own past, the loneliness of her childhood, the pressure of her career, and how Max had thawed her guarded heart. Mr. Thompson listened quietly, then shared stories of his wife's final days. "She told me to find joy again," he said, watching Luna chase fireflies. "I didn't think I could until Max." The woods seemed to hold their words, weaving them into the rustling leaves. A hurricane battered the city, flooding streets and displacing families. The Max Foundation transformed into an emergency shelter for pets separated from owners. Emily worked tirelessly, coordinating rescues, while Mr. Thompson comforted a trembling chihuahua found clinging to a rooftop. Days later, a tearful reunion between a little girl and her soaked, shivering cat made the local news. The reporter asked Emily why she did it. She glanced at Luna, snoozing in a corner. "Because every life is a story," she said. "And every story deserves a happy ending." While organizing the foundation's archives, Emily discovered Max's old collar in a dusty box. The bell still jingled faintly. She held it to her chest, memories flooding back. The first time he'd followed her into surgery, the way he'd nudged her hand during late-night paperwork. That evening, she gifted the collar to Mr. Thompson. He hung it on his porch wind chime, where its soft chimes became a familiar comfort to neighbors. A reminder, he told visitors, that love outlives loss. A veterinary intern named Raj joined the foundation, inspired by Max's story. He had a talent for calming aggressive dogs, using techniques he'd learned from his grandmother in India. Emily saw flashes of her younger self in his ambition, and her older self in his growing empathy. When Raj successfully rehabilitated a scarred pit bull named Titan, he credited Emily. "You taught me that healing isn't just medicine," he said. "It's patience." Like Max. After Mr. Thompson passed peacefully in his sleep, Emily found a letter on his desk. Emily, it began, "If you're reading this, I'm finally with my wife and Max too. Don't mourn. Plant a tree for me in the hospital garden. Let its shade comfort others, like that scruffy little dog did." The tree, a sturdy oak, became a gathering spot. Children hung handwritten notes to Max and Mr. Thompson from its branches, their wishes carried away by the wind. Years later, an elderly German shepherd limped into the foundation's lobby. His owner, a Vietnam veteran, couldn't afford his treatment. Emily recognized the dog's weary eyes. They mirrored Max's the day she'd found him. The foundation covered the surgery, and the veteran, moved to tears, began volunteering. He'd sit with anxious pets, murmuring, "You're safe now," his hands steady on their heads. Luna, now gray-muzzled, often curled at his feet. A filmmaker chronicled the foundation's work, focusing on Luna's role as Max's successor. The documentary aired globally, sparking donations and volunteer applications from as far as Kenya and Japan. Emily, initially camera-shy, found herself narrating Max's story to millions. During the premiere, a young girl in the audience whispered, "I want to be a guardian too." Luna, sprawled on stage, thumped her tail as if in approval. When wildfire threatened the foundation's headquarters, volunteers raced to evacuate 80 animals. Emily, refusing to leave until the last crate was loaded, inhaled smoke that left her hospitalized. As she recovered, Raj took the helm, and communities rallied to rebuild. At the reopening, a mural of Max and Luna adorned the walls, painted by local artists. Emily traced Max's painted paw. "You're still saving us," she murmured. Emily's granddaughter, Lily, grew up volunteering at the foundation. At 16, she adopted a three-legged terrier named Scout, training him as a therapy dog. "He's like Max," Lily declared. Emily watched them greet a terminal patient, Scout's tail wagging gently. Later, Lily confided, "I want to run the foundation someday." Emily handed her Max's old leash. "He'd be proud," she said, her voice thick. On Emily's 80th birthday, the hospital unveiled a bronze statue of Max by the entrance. That same day, a nurse found a stray puppy, brown and white, one ear torn, sitting beneath it. The staff exchanged knowing smiles. Emily, leaning on Lily's arm, knelt stiffly. The puppy licked her wrinkled hand. "Hello, little guardian," she whispered. As the sun dipped, the puppy's shadow stretched across Max's statue, two protectors intertwined by time. The golden light of dusk spilled over the hospital garden, where the oak tree planted for Mr. Thompson stretched its branches toward the sky. Beneath it, a small bronze statue of Max gleamed, his head tilted as if listening to the laughter of children playing nearby. Dr. Emily Carter, her silver hair catching the light, sat on a bench with her granddaughter Lily, who now led the Max Foundation with the same quiet determination that had once defined Emily. At their feet, a scruffy terrier puppy, brown and white, with one ear slightly torn, chewed lazily on a fallen leaf. "He looks just like him," Lily murmured, nodding to the statue. Emily smiled, her wrinkled hand resting on the puppy's warm back. "Love has a way of circling back, doesn't it?" The years had etched stories into every line of her face, stories of loss and miracles, of lonely nights and sunlit reunions. But the ache of missing Max and Mr. Thompson had softened, replaced by a deep, abiding gratitude. The foundation had grown beyond anything she'd imagined. Shelters in 3 cities, therapy programs in schools, and a network of little guardians bringing comfort to thousands. Max's legacy wasn't just in the lives he'd touched, but in the love he'd taught others to nurture. As the puppy yawned and curled into a ball at her feet, Emily closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of blooming jasmine. Somewhere in the distance, wind chimes jingled, a sound that always made her think of Max's collar. She liked to imagine him now, racing through sunlit fields with Mr. Thompson and his wife, forever free from pain, forever guarding the hearts he'd once healed. Lily broke the silence. "We're naming the new shelter after Raj. He'd have hated the attention, but he earned it," Emily finished. They laughed, the sound mingling with the rustle of leaves. The puppy stirred, suddenly alert, his ears perking toward the hospital doors. A young boy in a wheelchair had rolled into the garden, his face pale but curious. Without hesitation, the puppy trotted over, nuzzling the boy's hand until a shy smile broke through. Emily watched, her heart swelling. This is how it goes, she thought. Loss carves space for new love. Grief gives way to grace. As the boy laughed, his mother knelt to pet the puppy, tears in her eyes. "What's his name?" she asked Lily. Lily glanced at Emily, who nodded. "Hope," she said. "His name is Hope." And in that moment, beneath the oak tree and the watchful gaze of a bronze guardian, the world felt exactly as it should, broken, beautiful, and endlessly reborn. The end.